Namaskar friends. In this video, we are first going to discuss in simple language what we talked about in the last few videos about performing karma, and then we'll go to the misconceptions that are prevalent in the minds of most of the people. So, what are the universal principles of performing karma? Friends, these principles are applicable irrespective of the caste, creed, religion, faith, country, or nation where the people live. It is irrespective of that. These principles are applicable to the entire population of the world. So, what are these principles? We'll go about it in a short way. First thing we discussed was that we have control over our actions because they are actually in our control, but we have no control over the results that will be generated after we have performed those actions. That is logical as we discussed. Second, what we discussed was that karma has to be performed by everybody. Even if you decide not to perform karma, the nature will make you perform karma. There's no doubt about this. Again, we discussed this in detail. Third important thing was that we should be focusing upon performing the karma with diligence and honesty. And our actions should not be driven by the senses. By the our actions should not be towards satisfaction of the senses. This we discuss in the detail. Then again, Bhagavan Krishna says that our intelligence should be, our thinking should be controlled by our intelligence, and our thinking should not be driven by the senses. Senses will always pull you in different directions, but we should use our intelligence in our thinking and decision making processes. Then the next important thing to note is that karma should be performed as a duty and with diligence and honesty. The next important thing was we must conform to the five fundamental principles of humanity while performing any karma. And that is the conduct that these five principles decide the conduct of a person. Then Bhagavan Krishna says that we should develop a sense of detachment from the material world. How this can be achieved, we'll discuss when we discuss the conduct a person should be following. One should get rid of jealousies and conflicts, etc. Again, it will come under how we define, how we perform our conduct in general manner in day-to-day living. We'll come to that in very great detail later. Then the most important thing Bhagavan Krishna says is that we must dedicate all our karma to Bhagavan Krishna, to the God Almighty. In that way, you will get rid of all your sorrows. It's a very important principle. And you can follow this principle and see the results for yourself. I mean, this principle cannot be proved in a laboratory. Only you have to do it and you have to experience it. And if karma is performed in this manner as a duty, with honesty, and without attachments to senses, and with a sense of detachment to material world, then this karma is powerful enough to take you to salvation. Karma itself is so powerful that it can take you to the point of salvation. And what does salvation means? What does the act of moving on the path of salvation means? Moving towards greater happiness in your life. So if you follow all these 10 principles of performing karma, maybe whatever profession you are in, then you will be moving towards happiness. That is the crux of stating all of these principles. Friends, now we go on to discussing the misconceptions that are prevalent not just in the Hindu society, not just in India, everywhere, all over the world, and especially in the Hindu society. So we go on to that. These verses are again from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavad Gita itself, Bhagavan Krishna is explaining, you must understand this and the importance of this. There's the fifth chapter, 14th and 15th verse. न कर्तृत्वं न कर्मणि लोकस्य सृजति प्रभु न कर्म फल संयोगम स्वभाव वस्तु प्रवर्तते. God Almighty neither prods any human to perform any work, nor assigns any karma to anyone, nor associates the results with the karma performed. A person performs karma according to person's own temperament and decision. Friends, this is one of the most important thing which people, especially Hindus, have completely deviated from. Normally, Hindus believe that all this karma, whatever they are doing, whether they are doing good work, whether they are doing thieving, whether they are into dacoity, whether they are looting public revenue, they think that all this Bhagwan is making them do it. But this verse, Bhagwan Krishna clearly states that he is not giving karma to anyone. He is not pushing any person to perform any particular karma. He is not assigning any karma to anyone. Then what is Bhagwan doing? Bhagwan is creating situations in your life based upon the karma you perform in previous lives. But the decisions, the actions you take in these situations is your own independent decision. It is not a decision given by God Almighty, Bhagwan Krishna. It is your own personal independent decision. So don't blame it on Bhagwan that he is making us do all this. This is a fundamental misconception that almost every Hindu has in his mind, his or her mind. Bhagwan Krishna is saying that karma performed by a person is according to his own temperament, his own bhav. And Bhagwan Krishna is saying that even the result that will come out of that karma, Bhagwan is not associating those results. It is the nature that gives the results. Okay, so this is one of the most fundamental things that all people should understand, that Bhagwan is not making you perform a particular karma. This is a fundamental shift in thinking that you have to make, because it has been stated in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. You can go and check. And there can't be any different interpretation or translation of this verse. It is this particular translation. In the next verse itself, chapter 5, verse 15, Na datte kasyachit papam na cha sikritam vibhu agyane navatam jnanam ten muhyanti jantuva. God Almighty does not present either sinful karma or pious karma to any person. Bhagavan is again confirming that he is not presenting any karma to anyone, whether it is pious or whether it is sinful. It is your own individual decision. And why people think so that Bhagwan is giving them all this karma is because the mind of humans is covered with dust of ignorance. And what happens when the dust of ignorance is covered on the mind? The mind gets disillusioned. You see, everybody's mind is a diamond. Everybody's intelligence is like a diamond, but it gets covered with ignorance. Friends, in previous videos we discussed that ignorance is a separate entity. It is not absence of knowledge. Ignorance is not absence of knowledge. We discuss the ignorance types, Andhatamist, and so on. So, ignorance is like the viruses. All the knowledge is there in the computer, but ignorance is like the viruses that are introduced in the computer, which cover this knowledge, which is already present in all of your brains. This you must understand. So, this dust of ignorance has to be removed from your mind, and we'll come to that later in this series of lectures. Okay, so this again in this verse, Bhagwan Krishna is clarifying that God Almighty does not present either sinful or pious karma. It is all your own personal decision, not God Almighty's. And because your mind is covered with ignorance, that diamond, it has lost its sheen, it has lost its shine. You must contemplate on these two verses. These are the most important verses, and you should get rid of your conceptions which you have accumulated over years and years. With this, we go to the next video.